hands in regards to picking bet sizes and some combo selection. But yeah, we'll see. So the first thing, yeah, and here is the database with the hands that I marked. The only problem, that is my mistake, so sorry for that, is that I didn't mark hands based on the mistakes. So I just marked all the hands that we can look over. Um, if anyone wants to take a screenshot of these optimal stats, you can do that. But this is a document I won't share with anyone except me. So, first thing first, it seems like you are a bit tight pre-flop, but that's like VPI, VPFR is a bit lower, but I don't think that's a big problem if the rake is slightly higher. So you pay like 6 big blinds per 100, which is not very high, so you could pay a bit more boost, but that's not an issue. When it starts to get a bit worse is folding to 3 bets. Like here, out of position, I think overfolding to 3 bets is fine, so I don't think this is a big leak because a lot of opponents make 3-bet sizes that are too big. Some opponents also under 3 bets, so I think overfolding a bit out of position is fine. This might still be a bit too much. But yeah, this imposition, you are definitely folding too much to 3 bets, and I did mark some hands which show those spots where you overfold, and this is definitely a big leak. So you way overfold big blind to small blind. Still, this is like 15% overfold, 15% overfold. That basically means that your opponents could profitably open any 2 cards. So you need to get this in order. Also, this is correlated to overfolding big blind because it seems like you also under 3-bet big blind. And the way big blind 3-betting works is we basically want to 3-bet the polar range. So I'll show you here. I'm sorry, my ranges are very fucked up. Where is big blind versus small blind? So this is the range. I'm sorry for the way it looks. But anyway, what you're gonna see is that big blind versus small blind is gonna be a very polar range. That means we're gonna 3-bet the top of our range. So what you see here, obviously, our biggest pairs and our best suited connectors, some ace-x, suited ace-x. But then we are also gonna 3-bet the part of our range that doesn't really wanna see a flop, but also doesn't wanna fold. So it's basically the bottom of our range. That's why you're gonna see, if you have a hand in the big blind that you're like, I'm not sure if it's gonna play very good as a call, then often 3-betting it is going to be an option. And these hands, as you see here, it's gonna be stuff like Jack 6 and below. So basically suited Jack X and suited 10X that are low and can't really make straights, same with 9X. And then you're gonna see a bunch of these offsuit combos that again don't play very well post flop, like offsuit ace-x, offsuit king-x, queen-x, 10x, and so on. So I assume you might miss some of these 3-bets. Also, the reason why we 3-bet like this is because small blind is supposed to 4-bet very often and 4-bet polar. So we don't really want to 3-bet hands that don't want to face a 4-bet or that play bad in a 4-bet pot. And so basically these hands that we 3-bet play well for facing a 4-bet and can just shove or call. While these hands are very comfortable folding to a 4-bet because they don't have a lot of equity. The implications of these are that in reality we can actually 3-bet way more than this optimal strategy, which you see is 19%. And my advice is to actually 3-bet more because a lot of opponents, first of all, overfold and definitely miss some 4-bet. So in this database, it seems like you only 3-bet 9%, and I think you should basically, 16%. And even like 16%, I think you should probably try to increase it to like 21, maybe even 22. So I think it's better to see a number here that's too high than too low. And again, we're gonna go over some hands soon. Any questions until now? Anyone?
No,
Hey, can, can we have a super short introduction of Romain? Like, are you playing a lot? So, like, what stakes, cash, zoom, just to get like an idea of like what kind of player stats we're looking at?
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry for that. I've never done it before. So yeah, please, Romain, introduce yourself.
So I play NL50 Zoom mostly. I was on PokerStar until recently, and I switched to ACR. I've been playing for 3 years, starting like I don't know 2 3 years ago. I play it depends like 20 25K hands a month like that, and I'm losing so far. Like NL50, I've never beat it so far. I'm like losing at I don't know. I'm like breaking even after rake back at best. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Can I just ask a quick question? Alex, you're definitely recording this, yeah?
Um, yes, I'm
Okay.
definitely. Can you talk so I see if it picks up what you're saying?
Yeah,
Me?
hello?
Yeah, it doesn't. Mm. Can you talk now?
Yeah, hello?
Again?
Hello?
Yeah, I think it picks it up, but not too great.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, anything else? Can we go on with this? All right, I'll take that as a yes. Again, a bit more three bet button versus big blind, where you would mostly see the same thing. So here, if you go on GTO Wizard or like different ranges, will look very different. This is the and basically it also depends on the reaction and stuff, but in most ranges you will see some hands that are relatively polar. So when you look here, you see a lot of suited ace-x betting, a lot of like one gappers and suited connectors and stuff like king, some lower king x suited, jack x suited. So again, maybe a bit more three betting from the big blind, especially against late positions. I think against early positions. So I looked over some hands, and it seems like you do three bet a bit too often against early position, but a bit too little against late positions. So yeah, I would recommend you look a bit further into ranges, because it seems like you often get yourself in tough spots post flop because you're three betting way to lose against early positions. So yeah, just make sure you differentiate between an early position open and a late position open. Four betting is decent in most positions, although when I checked some of your hands from the small blind, it seems like you massively overfold to three bet. So like this overfold to three bet out of position, I think it might actually come from blind versus blind spots, because I've seen some hands that are actually very winning calls, which you did fold against the big blind three bet. So yeah, again, when you're in the small blind against big blind, probably you'd have to four bet more and call a bit more hands. Again, folding to four bet. These it shows that you are overfolding too much, but some things I would like to add in this spot is that a 50 NL zoom, most people actually under 3 bet, especially in position. So I think overfolding to 4 bet out of position is good. But then again, you seem to overfold a bit in blind versus blind to 4 bets, which is not good. So and the other thing I wanted to add here is that when you're in the big blind, as I said before, you tend to three bet hands that are a bit too mergy or too weak against earlier positions, and then they four bet you, and you have to fold to a lot of four bets basically because you three bet too many hands. But you also three bet some hands against late positions that are, if you three bet them, you have to call a four bet, and you end up you end up folding them, which again I think is good with some hands because opponent under 4-bet, but I think with some hands it's not that great, and we'll see later what I'm talking about. Here I've also seen two little c-bet blind versus blind on high boards. Again, so you should definitely see bet more often blind versus blind, but at the same time what I was surprised by, because your c bet seems too low out of position, you see bet too often in single grade spots out of position which are non-BVB. So basically, if you open early position or MP or cutoff and you get called by the big blind, or well, anyone in position, especially in multi-way pots, what I've noticed is you seem to see bet a bit too often, and for a size that is too big. Because basically the way multi-way spots work is equities will be divided between multiple players, and often equities will shift on the turn. So there aren't a lot of spots where we want to put in a lot of money into the pot. And especially not on low and middling boards, because these players often have ranges that kind of connect with those boards better than ours. That being said, it's still fine to bat those boards and use big bats exploitatively if you know you're playing against a whale or a fish in the pot, but if you're playing Zoom, I don't think that's the case as often. So in terms of c-betting out of position, I would play a bit more range checks when I'm not in a blind versus blind spot, and I would start c-betting a bit more, particularly on these high boards. Even range betting is fine on a lot of boards when you are blind versus blind. Was that clear?
Yeah.
All right, and this is like another leak that I've seen, which is overfolding to c-bet both in position and out of position. To this stats, I didn't manage to like look at a bunch of hands and filter for them. Again, like these are spots like c-betting where population kind of under bluffs and they have stronger ranges when they bet big. So when they bet like over half pot, when they bet pot. So I think in those spots, like overfolding is good, but if they bet 1/3, a lot of people actually over c-bet because they range bet bets that boards that shouldn't be range bet and so on. So like in those spots, overfolding to c-bets is not great. You should actually start check raising a bit more and calling a bit more, and maybe start bluffing them on the river and stuff like that. I think this is too high, assuming you mostly face small bets. So, what do you see in your pool most often? Do you see these small bets or bigger bets?
Yeah, it's a lot of 1/3.
Yeah, so against 1/3, I would look a bit more into defending more versus c-bets. And the other stats are fine. This probing turn, these are some spots that I would like to talk about. So as you see, like probing turn and delayed c-betting are way too high compared to optimal frequency. But in reality, especially delayed c-bet, like it seems like MDA shows that turn probes are sometimes even overcalled by the battle rags nowadays, but still I think in 50 and I'll zoom they would probably still be overfolded, and delayed c-bets are massively overfolded. So I actually like seeing a higher number in this spot. But again, when I had a look over your hand, so the way, first of all, delayed c-betting works is most people don't protect their turn checking ranges enough, or their flop checkback ranges, depending if we are in position or out of position. So then we can delay c-bet way more often than optimal and put a lot of pressure on the ranges. But this line will be super profitable if you delay c-bet your bluffs on the turn, and in most spots follow through on the river unless the runout is terrible for you. But what I've seen is that you massively over delay c-bet turns, but then give up a lot of river spots, which I think is one of the things that really leaks a lot of win rate and probably makes your red line suffer quite a lot as well. So what I would advise is when you delay, and I've also seen some delayed c-bets with mergy hands that are not really like bluffs or value bets, stuff like ace highs, but on a board where you don't really get better to fold, and you can get worse to call, but you are out of position in a spot where like some bets are just, you don't accomplish much by betting. So my advice in this regard would be to always think about, okay, what do I actually accomplish here by betting? Do I get called by worse hands? Do I get better hands to fold? And if I do bet here, what is my plan for the river on different runouts? And obviously, it's very difficult to think of that in game. Like, what if I bet here? What if a flush comes? What if it's a jack on the turn? What if it's a king? What if it's a flush? Whatever. But I think when you study and when you review your hands, it would be super beneficial for you to think of a game plan from the turn or from the flop. Like, I don't know, for example, okay, I have this hand, how much is it worth? Can I go 2 streets, or can I go 3 streets, or can I just go 1 street? If I can go 2 streets for value, when would I want to go for those 2 streets? Do I want to go bet, or do I want to go bet, check, bet? And this depends on a lot of your opponent tendencies. So, because every and each of these actions accomplish something, right? So, for example, if you have a hand that could go double barrel, but not triple barrel, you could go for double barrels and get called by a lot of draws and pair plus draws and stuff like that, and then to check back river. With the same hand, you could also go for a bet flop and then check back turn to give him the opportunity to bluff the river, so you get value from his bluffs. So it always depends on the opponent tendencies, but what I'm trying to say is always try to think of a game plan in advance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Here folding to check raise is also looks a bit too high, but to be honest, I don't really mind this because I think most people still under check raise, and the other problem is not only they under check raise, but their check raising range is often too equity driven, which means they're not gonna have, like, I don't know, on some boards they are supposed to check raise, for example, just ace 5 that has no draw and blocks 2 backdoor flash draws. And if people miss those check raises, even if they check raise a bit more stuff like, I don't know, gut shots or open enders or stuff like that, what that means is that they will barrel turn more often than they are supposed to. So your flop loose calls won't be very good. So I actually don't mind slightly overfolding to check raises. And this is also a leak because if we correlate this, so basically this means when you open small blind, it's gonna be more often. It's gonna happen in other spots, but most of these hands will be blind versus blind. So when you open small blind and you get called, as I said before, your c-bet out of position was quite low. And if your c-bet out of position is very low, especially because MDA shows people overstep, then you should have a very high check raise. But you have a very low c-bet and also a very low check raise, which, again, this might be an issue. So I think you need to find more check raises from the small blind. But I also think you need to be careful with how you construct your range, because I did mark some hands in this spot when you actually check raise, but you check raise hands that have too low equity in those spots, and we're gonna talk when we look over the hands how we should construct our check raising range here in those spots. And again, in here, I don't think it's much of a problem. Fold river bets again. Depends on the field, but I think it's safe to assume that most spots are still going to be underbluffed in this field. Here, this is a league that basically everybody has, like every player that I've looked into, except for the aggro degenerates, have a massive leak here, so they don't really raise turn probes enough. It is actually an overfolded spot, especially if they bet for small sizes, so I think good spot to exploit population versus small bets that you seem to miss. But again, like here, I don't think this is a massive issue, because it's probably better not to do this than to do this wrong and start doing it with the wrong hands or in the wrong spots. But like if you are planning to study stuff, I think this is a spot where you can gain some win rate, but I wouldn't say it's a priority, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
One to showdown is decent, maybe a bit high for this field, but what doesn't make much sense to me is how is this one to showdown so high, considering that you seem to overfold to C bets in all spots, and still your one to showdown is very high. Might have a hint of why that is from your hands, and women's off flop, again in a field like this, especially playing Zoom, I think be higher. So I think it should be closer to 52 than 48. And again, these are spots like I think what's slightly lower. I mean, first of all, it's great you're not like 45 or 44 women's off flop. You see a lot of those players, especially at like 50 and below. But I think what hurts this number is the fact that you do make a lot of like turn probes or delayed C bets and stuff, and then you give up the river. So yeah, you should in a lot of those spots you should either not try to bluff turn, or if you bluff turn, just follow up on the river, because it's gonna be way more profitable than betting one street. These are C bets in 3-bet pots. So in position, I think C betting a lot is fine. People don't really check raise enough. They kind of end up over defending pre-flop and getting to the flop over defending, but just by calling, and then getting to the flop with a lot of marginal holding. So I think C betting a lot in position is fine. Out of position is a bit too high, and what I assume here is that you range bet a lot of boards. I didn't filter for 3-bet pots, so I didn't look at sizings. But again, there are a few boards where we can bet 1/3 range in 3-bet pots out of position, but there would also be other boards where we can still range, but you should use a half pot size, or where we should start mixing and use bigger sizings and have some checks and stuff like that. So I don't know, what do you play off in just 1/3 C bets in 3-bet pots out of position?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so this is something that I would also look into. Usually the textures that we can range but 1/3 are gonna be, I mean, which we can simplify to see betting 1/3, because it's not really what happens in theory, but I think in practice it's more than fine. Are gonna be like ace high, king high boards, queen high boards, jack high and below. I would start going half pot, even though like a dry jack high board you can still see bet half pot. And then when we go lower, especially if the board is a bit more connected, like 10-9x, 10-8x, stuff like 8-9x, 8-7x, on those boards, what's happening is that our value range will be mostly constructed around overpairs. and those want to go for big sizes and get value on the flop, and we're also not gonna have a lot of hands that want to see bet 1/3. Like our bluffs want to deny equity, our value hands want to go big for value. So on those kind of boards, see betting 1/3 range doesn't really work as well anymore. And we also have like a lot of hands that miss the board, so a lot of random overcards and stuff. So on those kind of boards, we can't really see bet range anymore. And yeah, I think this was it with most of the stats. Any questions?
No, all good for me.
Um, okay, and then I started looking into hands, and I've seen this thing that I think might be what burns you most of your win rate. Um, it seems like in some spots you don't actually realize how tight the ranges are, and you get all in very very thin. And in other spots, I kind of got a feeling from some of the hands that I looked at that when you feel uncomfortable and you're not really sure what to do, you just shove.
Yeah, yeah,
Does that feel relatable?
yeah. Le-
So yeah, sorry, go on.
no, a bit less now, but yeah, I still do that.
I can actually relate to that because it is a leak that I definitely had in the past, and when I review hands, I also see it in some of my hands as well. And this thing happens because like there are spots that are actually difficult spots, and we stay there and thinking, okay, what should I do now? And then if I take a decision now, like if I call, then what do I do on the river if he shoves? I don't know. I don't want to fold. Let's just get it in and get rid of this feeling of being uncomfortable. I think that's what happens to a lot of poker players. I don't know if it's what's happening to you.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Um, so my advice in those spots would be to basically get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because a lot of spots in poker will be uncomfortable and will be hard, but we need to get used to being under that pressure and start thinking about all the possibilities and make the best decisions. Because yeah, just trying to get rid of that uncomfortable feeling and take an action just so it goes away, it's gonna burn us win rate. Um, okay, the other league that I've seen was picking bet sizes, and I've seen you don't really use overbets, or at least not enough. I've seen you overbetting in some spots, but I've seen a lot of spots there were supposed to be bet for an overbet size where you pick 75%. And I think that's also something that will result in you losing a lot of win rate. Some people think about like overbets in spot like this optional thing or like this advanced strategy, but it's definitely not like that, because in some spots you will gain so much more EV by overbetting and being able to get all the money in by the river, um, that it will actually make a big difference to your win rate. So this is mostly to write this here, especially when you see that flop in single race spots and there is a blank. So what you will see in these spots, we should mostly use overbets. And yeah, I think it's gonna gain more EV with both our bluffs and our value hands. In terms of c betting strategies, I wanted to ask, do you have some set strategies in terms of what sizings you're gonna use on a certain board texture, or like how do you pick what size you see bet and if you see bet or not?
Not like a clearly set strategy, like I'm gonna bet smaller on higher boards, so drier boards, and bet bigger on like lower boards and like more connected boards, basically.
Yeah, that pretty much summarizes it. It depends a lot on the textures and stuff, but I did see some hands that where you seem to basically bet based on your hand value, which again I think it's a great idea against fish, and even though I'm not for like balancing and stuff, I think having a having a flop betting strategy that you know what it's gonna look like, I think that's actually quite important, because it's first of all it's easier for you to like follow through with your range and realize what you have on next reads. But I think this can be like, especially if you play in a small field, I think this can be at some point quite obvious for your opponents as well. So I think on the flop I would try to at least know how my strategy should look like and what bet size I should use based on the board texture and how the ranges interact. Um, Not my hand value, unless I'm playing against the fish. Like if I'm playing against a fish or a whale, just play your hand as it wants to be played. And this thing, in regards to game plan, I already mentioned just try to have a game plan, and I think here, having a knowing what your c betting flop strategy should look like is basically a part of these. We talked about this, and we also talked about this. You do seem to overbluff turn, but then you underbluff river, which in theory might be a good idea because like we have two wide of range on the turn, and we should give up more on the river. But the problem is in practice it doesn't look like it works like that, because people do overfold turn and then they also overfold river. So like giving up in these delayed nodes to river bluffs is just gonna burn money. Um okay, and now we can start going over the hands that I marked. If of course anyone has any questions, let me know.